Good evening, everyone. I want to comment on something I saw in the news today, and I'll start off by saying wisdom considers the end of the matter. Amen? I mean, I read the Bible, I read Proverbs, and everything I glean from what I read, you can conclude by saying that it's stressing we need to think about how our behavior and our choices are going to end, right? I think that's good advice for anybody, no matter what you believe. But as it relates to prison and prison reform, a number of years ago, lawmakers thought it was a great idea to get tough on crime, and I don't really think they thought it through perhaps the way they should have when they were trying to win votes. So here we are today in a situation that's unsustainable as it relates to men and women going to prison. So 20, 30, 40 years ago, they want to get tough on crime, and so they instituted things like mandatory minimum sentences, the extended term, and three strikes you're out. And so now we have all these people in prison who were young men then and young women, and today, they're aged and they're in their 50s and 60s. And, on the one hand, there's a lot of health issues. And who do you think pays for the health issues? Well, the government pays for the federal inmates, and the individual states pay for the state inmates. And I think that's one reason they want to let people go. But let's just give lawmakers the benefit of the doubt and say they want to do it for the right reasons. I don't care why they let them go, as long as some of these people are let out. But let's say they're doing it for the right reason. Even though you're freeing inmates, and I'll just 1 second, Cory, what I'm responding to is Cory Booker's comments regarding the age and wanting to give them a second chance, a second look at their criminal history, because a lot of these people are no longer a threat to society, and some of them never were a threat to society in as much as they broke the law. So he wants to give these individuals who've been in prison now 20 and 30 years, in their 50s and 60s, a second look and perhaps a second chance at life. And I just, I'm all for that. I'm for that. But also, having been an individual who's been to prison, and certainly not for that length of time. I mean, I spent 3 years in prison, but I got to tell you something. Coming home is a culture shock, and I'm going to explain it to you. It's like one day you're put on a bus and you're chained to 40 other inmates, and there's men with weapons on that bus, and you're taking to a prison where this gate opens, and then you go inside and there's guard towers. Men with weapons are going to be looking at you for the next however many years you're there. You're strip searched everywhere you go into prison. You go from this point to that point. You got to take your clothes off. If you got to move outside the prison, well, you're chained and you're shackled. And all of a sudden one day, you go from being this animal in a cage, or in some of these dorms are even worse, the inhumane conditions that men and women live in. You go from living in those conditions to them opening the door and say, okay, you're no longer a danger, go home. And it's like, it's a culture shock. And to navigate that alone is very, very difficult. Now, you take these individuals who 20, 30 years in prison, and remember, up until recently, it hasn't been about reform. It hasn't been about restoring the man or woman. It hasn't been about rehabilitation. It's been about retribution, right? Payback for the crimes that you committed. It's been about punishment, purely punishment. And so now here we are, all these years later, we're going to let these men and women go. And here's the thing. We see the images of the people that Donald Trump and Kim Kardashian worked together to get out of prison, and a couple of these individuals have come out, and their families were standing at the gate with arms opened, and this amazing reunion which they should experience. But it's not that way for everybody. It's not that way for a lot of people. The fact is, a lot of these people, when they went to prison, they had burned every bridge they had. Their families have restraining orders against them. They can't even go back there. They don't have job skills. They don't have an education. The average grade level in prison's fourth grade. It's around there. They don't have trade skills, like I said. A lot don't have social skills. They don't have driver's license. They're gonna owe fines. And even if they had a driver's license, they don't have a car to get to job. Like, it's very, very difficult. And so, on the one hand, we have this population of inmates who are nonviolent, who spent 20 and 30 years in prison, 15 even for a nonviolent offense to me can be a lot. And now we're just opening the door and saying, "I see you later, go home." And I feel like, to the degree we've sentenced people to prison for decades, when in fact they didn't hurt another human being, they didn't rape another human being, they committed some kind of financial crime or break in or something. I just feel like we need to prepare them and equip them to go home and to succeed. Because I'm going to tell you something, at the end of the day, if you don't have food, sooner or later, you're going to steal something to get food. You're going to do something to eat, okay? If you're in the cold or whatever the situation may be, you're going to do what you need to do to survive. And in a sense, these people are being cast out onto the street and put in a position where where it's survival of the fittest, because the resources just aren't available to meet the needs of every single person. So I'm just saying that maybe our government and the people who are now, working with prison reform would want to take a step back and just kind of rethink the process of letting inmates go home. Maybe they have places that they could send the inmates where they could live there for a period of time and get a job and get on their feet, pay off their fines, get their license back, get themselves in a position where they can go on out and on their own and ultimately succeed. But I'm worried. I'm worried about a couple of things. One is that these inmates that are being released after all of these years in prison aren't going to have the means to succeed. And the other thing I'm worried about is that this has, become this tabletop, kitchen table conversation, and people are pretty much supporting prison reform and rehabilitation. And if it's not done right, and the needle of recidivism doesn't move, like what's happening in California, okay, with the hundreds of millions of dollars they've spent on rehabilitation, people are going to get discouraged, and they're going to get disgusted, and they're going to give up hope on inmates being able to turn their lives around. I'm telling you, I'm proof that no one's life is hopeless, and I know hundreds of people just like myself who are out there doing things just like I'm doing today, who should be a part of this conversation, because we have navigated the failure of prison and of parole to find a way to live a successful life. And so, guys and girls out there, please be praying for Heidi and I as we go. Prayer does change things. It is powerful, and we need your prayers. So don't forget to check us out on YouTube. Go to Prisoner of Hope Ministries. That's Prisoner Singular. Prisoner of Hope Ministries on YouTube. And you can follow us all through our journey this summer. We'll look for you there. God bless you.